Sir, if you would, if you don't mind, at the legislature, we have people get up, we'll have them state their name and who they represent. It may just be your name and as a citizen, but if you've got any association that you're with, you're welcome to state that.
My name is Michael Weed. I live in Little Rock. I don't represent anyone except me.
Okay.
I am a disabled veteran. That has nothing to do with what my comment is here. My comment is, okay, you're saying the science is not fully there yet. Therefore, the FDA cannot approve it as a medicine. Okay, there is a catch-22, as you know, with that. Schedule 1, it can't be studied because you can't get it, not significant quantities. Also, why is the good science that has been done in the state of Israel regarding post-traumatic stress disorder being ignored?
So, good question. Most of the research that you're going to find on PTSD or any other subject is talking about the compounds within marijuana. So I've looked at that gentleman's research, and I've also looked at a lot of the other people who are often said to be pro-marijuana. When you look at a lot of the research they're actually doing, when they're interviewed, they say marijuana can do this, marijuana can do that. And so you think, well, they are in favor of handing out marijuana to the plant. When you look at their research, what they're showing in the research is they're researching the compounds. And some of them are doing it excellently. So like this guy in Israel, I think it's fantastic that he's doing this in a really great way. But the problem is that when it's communicated to the public, they don't say the compounds in marijuana, they say marijuana. And to your first point, I can't really comment on the DEA scheduling except to say this, that the DEA looked at this for a long time. They were under a lot of pressure to change the scheduling. They didn't change the scheduling. That decision was made about a month ago. What they did do is they opened it up to have more sites to schedule, or more sites to research marijuana. And I think pretty much everyone I've talked to is in favor of increasing the research. And there's two sides to the argument. So there are some people that I've talked to who are very much in favor of marijuana, who on the one hand, they say the research proves that we should have marijuana, but then they come back and tell me, but no research is being done. And so
That's the catch-22.
right. So what I would say is this: is that anything that improves the research, I'm in favor of. I'm not with the DEA, so I'm not going to tell them how to do their job. But I do believe that we need to have more research on this, and that people like, for instance, Sanjay Gupta are calling for more research, and I'm fine with that.
I think our elected officials can apply more pressure to the FDA since the FDA is funded by Congress.
Yeah, but it falls under the jurisdiction of the presidential administration. So, there have been a lot of the elected officials who've been saying one thing or the other, pressuring both ways.
Administered by the executive branch,
Right.
funded by
That's true. So, it's something that people feel very strongly about. And I'll just say, I agree with increasing research. Let Dr. Smith comment.
Just to add to that, kind of switching hats to my clinical background is taking care of patients with HIV and AIDS, and I've been caring for AIDS patients for over 20 years. And although there should be more research done, it's not as maybe dire as someone would lead you to believe. For example, there are over 80 different cannabinoids in marijuana, but the one that has the highest concentration, at least in today's marijuana, is the THC. And that has been licensed as an FDA-approved drug since the 80s. Marinol is dronabinol, which is THC. And I'm familiar with that medication because I prescribed to AIDS patients back 20 years ago before we had highly active antiretroviral therapy. And it was helpful. It helped improve appetite. It wasn't a miracle drug, though, and I haven't prescribed it probably in about 20 years, partly because we've got better treatments for HIV, but also because we have better treatments for nausea and for low appetite. And so even though THC is available by prescription in the form of Marinol, many people are not aware of that, and many doctors don't prescribe it, not because they're not aware of it, because they're barriers, but because it's not the most effective medication out there. Now, CBD, the cannabidiol, which doesn't produce a high at any time, in fact, it tends to modulate the euphoria, does show a lot of promise for treatment of pediatric seizures. And that is actually being developed as the drug Epidiolex, which is not FDA approved at this point, but from what I've read, it may be approved as early as 2018. So
Very good anti-inflammatory also.
I'll take your word for it. I'm not an expert in it, but that would be another component. You know, those are really the two best studied cannabinoids in marijuana. I'm sure there will be others that will be studied as well. But it's not as if we don't have anything derived from a marijuana plant that's available. Now, I think where the gap is until we have a commercially available FDA-approved CBD product, then those children with intractable seizures, you know, that's a gap. And I think Dr. Bledsoe has addressed that. Some of our surrounding states have created laws that would allow them access, but hopefully soon we'll have a product that is well-defined. We know how many milligrams are there. We have good studies showing its effectiveness, not whether it's effective or not only, but which patients it's effective in and which patients it's not so effective in, and then what are the side effects. You know, the FDA approval process is not perfect by any means, but what it does do is it gives physicians and patients some assurance that that when I write a prescription for a patient, I know what they're getting, they know what they're getting, I know how much they're getting, and I know something about the studies showing its effectiveness, and at least I can tell them what adverse effects have been found, and something about drug-drug interactions. You know, these are really difficult to do with a plant material that's a mixture of lots of different compounds. And, you know, questions of, you know, are there pesticides in there? Are there, you know, other substances that are contaminating it? This is a real problem as a physician, you know, prescribing a non-part
Goes back to that catch-22, you know, because it's Schedule 1, there's not enough marijuana plant material that is known to be pure, grown like at University of Mississippi and Oxford. There's just not enough to go around before we research. And I really don't want to dominate. I didn't intend to do this, but the other thing is regarding the opioid epidemic, which is very real. I myself am a victim of the opioids being pushed for chronic pain back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Okay.
If not opioids and no medical marijuana as an alternative treatment for the very real pain that's there, then and
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that's got a question? As you're getting ready for your question, I just want to ask in here, how many of you know that Arkansas passed legislation in a previous session under what's termed as right to try drugs? How many of you are aware of that? Okay, I have one. And how many of you would then be able to respond that you know what I mean by the term right to try? Okay, I do want to mention that. We're hearing a very clinical and a very scientific approach to the discussion. However, right to try is a situation where there perhaps is a drug that has not yet been fully FDA approved. And one of these gentlemen can interrupt me when it comes to the FDA, if you will. But in that situation, I want to give credit where credit's due. Senator John Cooper carried the primary bill. I supported the bill, definitely. And that's for someone, and I get calls every day in my office who say that they're not getting the help that they need from many of the government agencies that these gentlemen actually work with and work for. And in many cases, it's not that they're not getting the help that they can get, it's that they've got all the help that they have available for them. And those are the times when you call on people and try to find a solution that's going to help someone. Because I don't want to see anyone in pain. If they can save the life of a child or even an older adult, I want to see them have every opportunity to do that, no question. So I was very supportive of the right to try. When it comes, what I've heard here tonight is the compounds within the marijuana plant. He struck a nerve with me. I did not know that he had done as much time overseas. I knew that Dr. Smith had done some, but I've been active in malaria net distributions and trying to help people that are affected with malaria. And it's a reminder that the solution right now, the best that they have, which we sure hope they can get a better solution, it came from the oak of that, not the oak, but the bark of that tree in Peru. And so my point to say all that to you is, those of you that may be activists in this arena that are here tonight, they're very supportive. You need to think about those alternative means in which you are addressing this issue. If you truly are here for medical marijuana, then there may be alternative routes of which you can talk about the compound and look at it as an opportunity of the right to try for people that truly say and believe that they have no other solution but to have medical marijuana and are not satisfied with splitting out the compounds for the prescriptions. There are other options that are there. So I just want to throw that out. I would encourage you to read about right to try laws that are being passed around the country. And we have actually had results in this state already, people that say that they are alive because by having that option, it has allowed them to maybe either halt or cease the condition that they had. So it's a very interesting space. Sir, if you would, please state your name, and if you care to, if you represent anyone, sir.
My name is Daniel Mansell. I just represent myself.
Good.
A student at UCA.
Good.
First of all, thank you very much for coming out here. It was definitely very interesting, even though you're proposing viewpoints. I loved hearing you speak. It was very interesting. If you don't mind, I have it written down on home.
Sure.
Not
Very well.
public speaker.
You're doing a great job so far.
Thank you. How do you feel that the DEA, who a large percentage of their profit comes from the criminalization of marijuana, how do you feel that they have the final decision in rescheduling marijuana?
Interesting question.
So, yeah, so as a state official, I don't want to comment on a federal agency. I've made my opinions very clear without doing that directly. And I'll just say again, we need more research. Federal government is, I'm a small government political conservative with some libertarian tendencies. So I'll just say that. And there are a lot of places where the federal government overreaches. And I'm going to shut my mouth and let Dr. Smith go from there.
Again, I'm not a federal employee, so I'm not sure I'm qualified to talk about the DEA scheduling. I understand the definition. Schedule 1 means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but basically a drug gets in there because it's felt to have potential for abuse or addiction, and it doesn't have a demonstrated medical use. And so you can have compounds that do have high abuse potential, like cocaine, but also have a demonstrated medical use, and so they're not in Schedule 1. And then there are other drugs that maybe are not quite as addictive as cocaine, but they don't have a known medical use. Now, what I can talk about with more knowledge is our state scheduling process. Our scheduling mirrors the federal scheduling, with an exception. We have a Schedule 6, and we have moved cannabis and related compounds into Schedule 6. We handle those a bit differently in terms of law enforcement than we do Schedule 1 drugs. And, but still, a compound gets into Schedule 6 because it's chemically related to do cannabis or THC, but doesn't have a demonstrated medical use. Obviously, the exception is Marinol, dronabinol, which is THC in an FDA-approved form, and then that is not in Schedule 6. So at a state level, we've tried to do it in a way that makes sense, but in terms of the federal government, if they will make the marijuana compounds more available for research, I think that would achieve what I think all of us are hoping to achieve, which is better treatment options for more people.
I definitely agree on that point.
That's a great question. I want to add to that because I don't mind saying exactly what I think about it. And so where these guys work for the state, I'm elected by people here in this district. And so in terms of my perspective on two things there, one of the things is on research. There is no reason whatsoever that the federal government cannot be researching any and all sources of possibilities for remedies for people. I have very high hopes that someday that they will find a cure for cancer. I have very high hopes someday that they will find a cure for many other things that there are no cure for right now. When you see people sometimes that have been forced into a situation where their disease has taken them where they're completely physically incapacitated, sometimes even mentally incapacitated, can't speak, can't raise their head up. You bet, I want to know that they're researching all of these opportunities. And so it does disturb me a little bit, but your question, it disturbs me the fact that I'm hearing that perhaps there isn't the robust research being done. Okay, that bothers me a little bit. So I'm going to get into that a little bit more with these doctors offline. That does bother me a little bit, that the DEA should not be profiting, as you know, but I can see where you would make that statement and have that question. And it's one that's a political nature, and that's what this process is about. Very good question, and you did a great job. With it being 8 o'clock, yes, give them a hand. Is there one or two more questions so that we can get home in a decent hour? I have three. So will you promise me that since I was going to say, if it's the three, would you guys go ahead and come behind each other and line up, and we'll let this gentleman go. He said it's quick, and then we'll just take you 1, 2, 3. And I do appreciate you coming out. I'm very honored to get to be with you. I will ask one other question for the purposes of UCA and Dr. Bledsoe. How many of you actually are from Faulkner County or live in Faulkner County right now? Okay, so most of the people that came are Faulkner County people that's here, so that's good. I appreciate you for coming out. Sir, state your name, and if you have an association, you're welcome to state that as well.
My name is Gary Foltz. I'm the president of Rural Kansas for Compassionate Care, which is issue 7 on the ballot.
Okay.
I have Dr. Bledsoe's presentation was very good. I enjoyed listening to it. I have a few problems with some of the stuff that was said in it, and the biggest problem I have with it is the description of you talked about the tax issue. You need to go back and read it again. Under issue 7, the people of Arkansas do not pay a dime for the programs, any of the programs. The cannabis users will be the one that fund it. They pay the taxes. The state tax funds the health department's operation. The low-income money comes from the taxes and from the 1% sales from the cannabis distribution. So the people, when you make the statement that the people of Arkansas are paying for it, that's not true.
Do you have a question to close that with?
No.
So down there in the legislature, sir, we say, do you agree? That qualifies as a question. Okay.
So yeah, I didn't mean to insinuate that. You're absolutely right. The fund is set up from the tax revenue from the sales tax of the marijuana. Well, that's the act. It's different with the amendment, but that is from the act. One thing just to throw out here, because I've got a lot of friends who are libertarians and they're small government types, and they've asked me a lot of questions about this issue, about how the money and all this affects things. And my personal belief is that we won't be able to generate the money to take care of all the issues that will begin with the legalization of marijuana. That's my opinion. I know that people who are pro-marijuana see it the other way. They feel like that there will be a significant investment and that actually it'll be good for the state because we'll get increased tax revenue and all those things. To be honest, that actually worries me a little bit more because I'm a small government guy. I mean, if you think about it like this, you've got, let's say this continues and the federal government, or it goes nationally, and now we've got a system where hundreds of millions of dollars are being poured into the government coffers from the sale of marijuana. Now, I believe that marijuana is addictive, and it also carries some significant safety issues, especially with adolescents. So now what we've done is we have aligned our government to profit from the sale of an illicit substance that causes dependence and safety issues and health issues of the citizenry. And if that alignment, if that money is of significant value to the government, then I think that sets up a real conflict of interest. I don't want to have the people who have so much authority, especially the federal government, now dependent upon the income coming in from the sale of something that could be destructive in the lives of the citizenry. So that's just something that's a personal opinion. I have lots of friends that have various opinions on that subject, but just kind of throwing that out. But to get back to your original point, didn't mean to misrepresent that if I did in my talk, so you're absolutely right.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question, comment. A couple of weeks ago, I was at a national conference with other directors of state health departments, and I was particularly interested in talking with Dr. Larry Wolk in Colorado and Dr. John Weissman in Washington State, because they have more experience with this than obviously we do. And neither of them said this was good for public health in their state. What they did say is you're not going to make any money off of this, and these are the things that you need to be careful of. These are the things you need to watch out for. You need to watch out for assessing for contamination, the administrative burden of licensing, and various issues that they've faced in their states. And so, and those are my colleagues, counterparts in other states, and it has not been a moneymaker for them, at least from their perspective.
And sir, I want to make sure I understand. Did you say you were one of the executives that are?
Yes, I'm the president of Organ.
Okay, and so your group is actually one of those responsible for one of the ballot initiatives. Okay, all right. I appreciate you for speaking up on that. I want to get these questions out. I want to, hopefully you can guys remind me, I want to talk a minute about the federal government situation with no banking available for them. That's actually a very serious issue, and I want to make sure I say a word about that before we quit. Ma'am, I know I got to meet you, but for the Crown, would you please state your name?
Yes, my name is Francesca. I'm not affiliated with anybody. I'm just a student here. But I'm not just a student. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a veteran. I served 18 years pulling cocaine bales and marijuana bales out of the water in high seas, so I'm kind of new to this, and I'm definitely for medicinal marijuana. That being said, I'm 100%, 90% disabled through the VA, and currently I'm on 12 active prescriptions that I have to be very careful so I don't have an Anna Nicole moment because they have 5 major interactions. So that being said, sir, you were saying that your doctor should be able to carefully take care of you and be able to tell where you're at. But when you have like veterans like I or other people that have high amounts of medications that they have to take, how is that better than something that maybe could be controlled and take care of more than one problem at a time?
That's a good question. I really empathize with your situation. And I've also had patients who have very complicated, not just one issue, but multiple issues, and are on multiple medications. And it's a tough situation. And what you're always looking for, both the patient and the doctor in that case, is a quick fix, an easy out. And if you find it, the temptation is to rush in with no questions asked. I think a little bit of history, though, helps me as a clinician, but also as a public health leader. 100 years ago, physicians out of Arkansas were very well known for our acumen in treating syphilis, which was like AIDS back then. There was no effective treatment. But what they did use is high-dose mercury. And it really helped those patients. Of course, it destroyed their kidneys and it damaged their brains. They didn't know that at the time. I mean, no physician would prescribe it if they understood the risks. And because the risks generally occurred down the road after the benefit occurred, there wasn't a clear connection at first as to what they were doing to these patients. But they ended up trading a much worse problem, mercury poisoning, for what was already a pretty bad problem, syphilis. And that's why we obviously don't use mercury or mercury compounds anymore. But the doctors then didn't know it. And that was before we had this FDA approval process where you had to demonstrate not just the effectiveness, but also the safety. And so that's a powerful word of caution to me. When I look back at the things that physicians have given to patients, have used for all the right reasons, wanting to do good, mercury, arsenic, blood lead, all these things, physicians believed they were doing good, and over the short term, they may have been. But long term, they oftentimes were doing incredible harm. And I don't want us to repeat that again over and over. And that's why having compounds that are studied, that are demonstrated to be both safe and effective, is what our patients need, what they deserve. And I know it's hard to think about that when you're hurting with today's problems, but if you end up with other problems tomorrow that are caused by the interventions today, then you could end up being worse off.
Very good question, thank you. Ma'am, you have the honor of having the last question.
Okay, my name is Ashley, and sure myself, so excuse me if I'm very nervous. I have epilepsy, and I've been on medication for 12 years. I also have many mental health issues like borderline personality disorder, anxiety, suicidal ideation disorder, antisocial personality disorder, several things. I have been on medication for years and years. Recently, I quit smoking marijuana in December, and since then I've had 2 stays in the mental hospital. And I guess my question is the same with her. I don't understand how, I just want to know, all my medications that I take procedures, I mean, almost every antidepressant is out there. How it's caused, and then after months and months of being suicidal, they come out, FDA tells me that my medication has suicidal tendencies on it. It's like it can cause you to want to commit suicide. So they're putting me on all these medications that's causing all these horrible side effects. When I did smoke pot, it helped me sleep. It took my anxiety away. I was a better mother. I could function daily, but I couldn't deal with depression as much. I didn't have seizures. So how is taking one thing that's natural, grown from the ground, more harmful than a list of medications that's hurting my kidneys, my liver, and all that. I mean, that's what I'm kind of curious as to how. What makes y'all think that's a lot safer route, being on 6 or 8 different kinds of medication?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what Nate just said, which is, sometimes there are effects that you can't see, and it's not immediately. And, I first of all, I applaud your courage for coming up. And matter of fact, yeah, I think that's great to give her a round of applause for having courage. And I'm not going to argue, what you experienced with the drug. I'm not going to be arrogant and tell you that did or didn't happen. But what I would say is that when you look at the data that's involving marijuana use, there's a very tight correlation between people under the age of 25, especially who use it and exacerbate problems in the long term. So if I had a patient that had a background with psychiatric problems or struggles in that area, I couldn't in good conscience recommend marijuana. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I would just say that, we're bound by the data and the research there. And I've had people tell me all sorts of things over the years, that this helps or this doesn't help. But what happens is that sometimes it might have been something else that was contributing to the benefit that they were feeling, or the lack of benefit that they attributed to the drug. So, I mean, I don't know if that answers, but I would just say, I applaud your courage, and I'm sorry for your struggle, and, the goal that I have as Surgeon General is to make things as safe as possible for you and effective, and then also with the community. So that's about all I'd say about that.
I would just add to that, as a physician, my heart reaches out to you in compassion, and your doctors really need to look at what you're on and how to get you better. Of course, I'm not your doctor. It would be inappropriate for me to make any kind of recommendations of a medical nature. But I would say, in over 20 years of taking care of HIV patients, many patients who either have used marijuana or are using it or considered using it, and over those 20 plus years, what I tended to see is that those who have used it may have, in the short run, felt better, but then it tends to cause problems later on. And those who have stopped it, sometimes it felt worse initially, but in the long run, they have better outcomes. And I'm not your doctor, and I can't tell you that for yourself. I'm just sharing my experience as a doctor over the last 20 plus years.
Okay, you said something like, it can cause, it can be addictive. That's another reason why, daughter next. But Xanax, Klonopin, hydrocodone, all those are addictive. I have dealt with addiction when it comes because of my anxiety medication. I've taken the entire bottle of Xanax at one time. And my mother found me unconscious, So I guess I say, like, I want to live for my kids, and I've smoked marijuana for years, and I was a much better person. Now I'm all up, I gained weight. It does increase metabolism. 30% people that that smoked it on a normal, every day, not heavily, but they had type 1 diabetes was like your chance of developing type 1 diabetes was 30% less. I mean, like I said, I just don't understand how that's possible. Like I said, I've taken an entire bottle of pills before. I know what it feels like to be addicted, but you're still prescribing opiates. The Xanax is still legal. I've been drunk and I've been high, and I'm a much better person when I'm high than people that are out like drinking. But you can still drink at restaurants. You can still drink. I would much rather have a world full of whiteheads than alcoholics.
Thank you for your comment. We've had a good conversation. And actually, I just want to remind you of the time. It's 8:15. We're kind of flowing with it. I would like for both of you to get a chance to make a closing statement, if you would, if there's anything that you have to add.
Several times I've been asked, which is worse, alcohol or prescription opiates or marijuana, and I understand where that question is coming from, and I hear you on that. The public health professional, though, I'd like to check none of the above on that. The question at this point is, is the public health going to be better, with medical marijuana versus not? And I don't see evidence of that in states that have already crossed that line. Certainly I'm open to the argument that, marijuana might not be worse than opiates or alcohol, but you could also just say the same, which is worse, heart disease or cancer. If I already have heart disease, I don't necessarily want to add cancer to it. So, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have the choice between a a bunch of potheads and a bunch of alcoholics. In an ideal world, we would choose none of the above.
I was just saying, I don't have anything else to add. I talked a lot tonight. I just appreciate you guys. I mean that sincerely, because we need people like you involved in the political process. We need people like you having the courage to step out and to speak, their opinions. So thank you all very much for coming out, and I really enjoyed it.
You both for being